Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited that you're here. My name is Abby De Silva, and I'm a content creator on the Score team. We are joined by our partner, Test Innovators, today. Sarah from the Test Innovators team is a standardized test prep expert, and I'm going to pass it along to her to introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Abby. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Sarah, and I'm the SAT and ACT marketing expert at Test Innovators. And today, I'm going to talk to you about the SAT and the ACT.
Thank you, Sarah. Today, we are covering tips to help you prepare for college this spring. Test Innovators will kick off the event today by covering ACT and SAT prep tips. Then, SCORE will cover ways to save time and will also be sharing advice on letters of recommendation, college visits and list building, and financial aid. Throughout the event, we'll also be sharing how SCORE and Test Innovators can help you this spring. While this event is focused on guiding 10th and 11th graders through their spring college prep, this event could apply to anyone in high school that's interested in going to college. Parents and guardians are more than welcome to attend as well. We have set aside 45 minutes for this event today, including 10 minutes at the end of the event to answer your questions in the chat. If you can't stay the entire time, no worries. We'll send the event recording to everyone who registered for the event within 24 hours. We'll be sharing it via email. A quick note before we jump in today. During the event today, our goal is to provide helpful information for students and families as they navigate college planning. However, the timeline we'll share during this presentation today may not exactly align with your schools. Please contact your counselor for your school's specific 10th and 11th grade requirements for college prep. Now, a little bit more context about SCORE's partnership with Test Innovators. SCORE's goal is to create the best-in-class software solutions for college search, discovery, and planning. But we know there are other parts of the admission process where we don't have the expertise, like test prep. Test prep information is needed for students throughout the college prep experience, and that's where Test Innovators comes in. We want to provide experts who can provide their support, technology, and expertise in areas we need support in. Test Innovators shares our mission and values, and we are excited for you to connect with them today. These partnerships are not technological integrations, so you will not see their platform in the SCORE network. If you want to learn more about SCORE's partnerships, you can go to score.com/partners. Now, let's jump right into it, passing it along to Sarah.
All right, let's jump into ACT and SAT prep. The first step in getting ready for the ACT and SAT is to understand the test. So let's look at the structure and content of each test so that you can get a sense of what to expect. First up, the SAT. Last year, the SAT moved to a digital format. The test is now 2 hours and 14 minutes long, not including the break. It has just 2 sections, reading and writing, and math. Each section has 2 modules. The SAT is a computer adaptive test. So on each section, your performance on the first module determines the level of difficulty that you see on the second module. You'll receive a score for each section between 200 and 800. The 2 section scores are added together to give you a total score between 400 and 1600. The ACT is also changing this year. In its current form, the ACT is 2 hours and 55 minutes long, not including the breaks or the writing section, which is optional. It has 4 sections plus the optional writing section. The 4 required sections are English, math, reading, and science. On the ACT, you'll receive a score between 1 and 36 for each of the 4 sections. You'll also get a composite score or total score, which is the average of those 4 section scores. The new version of the ACT, which you may see called the Enhanced ACT or the ACT with enhancements, is shorter with more choice and flexibility. The new core test is just 2 hours and 5 minutes long, not including breaks. There are 3 core sections, English, math, and reading. And there are 2 optional sections, science and writing. So science is now optional. You'll still receive a score between 1 and 36 for each of the 3 core sections. Your composite score will be an average of these 3 section scores. If you decide to take the science test, you'll get a score between 1 and 36 for that section as well. And then you'll also get a STEM score, which is the average of the science and math scores. So when is this happening? When is the ACT changing? Well, the first students to see the new version of the test will be US students taking the ACT on a computer on a standard weekend test date. Those students will see the new version starting in April of this year, so April 2025. US students who are taking the test on paper and international students will see the new version starting in September. Students taking the ACT in school won't see the new version until April of 2026. So how are these tests used in admissions? Do you really have to take the SAT and ACT? So before we jump into it, I just want to say this is not an exhaustive list of all the colleges and things can change. So always check the application requirements directly with the schools you're applying to, at the time you're applying. So to take a step back, during the pandemic, many schools moved away from requiring testing. It's just very, very difficult for, with the pandemic, for students to find test centers and be able to test in person. So schools stepped away from requiring testing, and a lot of schools, kept that policy for a number of years. This past admission cycle, we saw a big move back to schools requiring the SAT and ACT, with schools like Dartmouth, Brown, Harvard, Caltech, Stanford, Yale, and UT Austin going back to requiring test scores with the application. A couple schools, such as MIT, had previously gone back to requiring testing, but this year was the first time since the pandemic that we saw a big shift back towards test required applications. Some schools are still test blind, meaning they don't look at test scores as part of the application process. Most notably, the entire UC and Cal State system, that's University of California and Cal State system, meaning all of the California public schools are test blind. So Berkeley, UCLA, UCSD, Cal Poly, SDSU, et cetera, those schools do not look at your test scores as part of the admissions process. Most schools are test optional, meaning students can choose whether or not to submit their scores with their applications. And so it's straightforward if you're applying to a school that requires the test or a school that's test blind. But what happens if you're applying to test optional schools? What do? So the trend, as we said, is moving back towards requiring testing, but most schools are still test optional. So should you still take the SAT and ACT if you're only applying to test optional schools? And I think there are a couple considerations here. I do want to say that just because a school is test optional doesn't mean it doesn't value the test scores. Test optional schools still do value test scores. And I would encourage everyone who is applying to schools to take a look at what the schools who have returned to testing have said about their decision. In particular, I would encourage you to check out Dartmouth's study. They did a whole study and had that as sort of backup for their decision to go back to testing. And really what they said is test scores are only one part of the holistic admissions process and are viewed in the context of the rest of the application. They're really more than just a number. They do provide valuable information about the candidate and can really help the schools evaluate candidates from all backgrounds. And it's particularly valuable if you're coming from, a school that is less well known to the institution. If your school sends lots of people to Dartmouth every year, the Dartmouth admissions team is probably pretty familiar with your high school. But if they've never sent anyone to Dartmouth, if no one from your school has ever gone to Dartmouth, the admissions team might not be as familiar with your school. So that's where the test scores really, really help. So, and of course, every admissions department's a little bit different, but I would just, encourage you to see what admissions departments have said about that. Strong test scores also have other uses. They can make you a more competitive candidate for certain scholarships. And indeed, some scholarships require SAT or ACT scores. Test scores may also be required or encouraged for a specific major or program at a larger school that's test optional. For example, let's say you're applying to a big university, and within that university, you're applying to a specific program, like the engineering school, the architecture school, the nursing school. Double check the requirements, not just for the university as a whole, but for the particular program you're applying to. Sometimes the test scores are either required or encouraged for the program within the larger institution. Test scores can also be used for class placement for admitted students, even at test blind schools. So even the UC and Cal State system will use test scores for some freshman class placement. So this can be an advantage at registration your freshman year, your first semester. Perhaps it can save, a little time and money if you're able to skip the entry level class and go into the class that's the next step up. So if you're just applying to California public schools, then it's true. You don't have to worry about taking the tests for admissions purposes. However, you may want to consider taking the test for course placement purposes. It's also an advantage to have, in your back pocket for any out-of-state backups you're applying to. In short, I would encourage you to at least, take the SAT or ACT, even if you're just applying to these test optional schools. If you feel like your scores really detract from your application and don't show who you really are, you don't have to submit them. But they help keep your options open and, again, have other uses besides just the admissions. Okay, let's talk a bit about test anxiety, which is something that's very common. So like other high-stakes situations, the ACT and the SAT can evoke anxiety. Indeed, 10 to 40% of students experience test anxiety. So it's really important to recognize the signs and even more important to know how to combat it. And I just want to say, if you feel anxious about these tests, you are not alone. So know that you're not alone. This is a common thing, and there are things you can do to combat it. So I would say the best way to mitigate test anxiety is to get comfortable with the test. Best way to do that is to take practice tests. So there's a lot of practice out there for both the ACT and SAT. So you want to ensure you're using quality materials. You want to make sure your practice tests are full length, and they should be in the same format as the actual test. So if you're taking the digital SAT, it's important to make sure that your practice tests are computer adaptive. If you're taking the ACT, find out which format you'll see on test day and be sure to practice with the correct version. Another great way to combat test anxiety is to, have a plan. Know exactly what to expect on test day, when to arrive, where you'll be testing, and what to bring. Having a plan will help ease test day nerves. It's just one less thing to worry about. So Scoir and Test Innovators put together a test anxiety battle guide to help you combat test anxiety. I encourage everyone to check it out. Okay, now let's discuss when you should practice and take the SAT and ACT. First up, before you even, look at a practice test, the best way to set yourself up for success is by taking classes that will teach you the concepts and skills that you need for the SAT and ACT. For the math sections, I'd say generally speaking, I know everyone's curriculum's a little different, but generally speaking, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry courses will cover most of the content that's tested. So you want to make sure you're on track to complete these courses by 10th or 11th grade. Or of course, they're equivalent in your curriculum. For the reading sections, so that's reading and writing on the SAT, as well as, reading and writing reading and English on the ACT, it's important to have strong comprehension and composition skills. So classes that focus on reading and writing are great. These classes can be in a variety of subject areas, such as English, literature, and history, but essentially classes that require you to read a bit and then write papers are excellent training for the tests. When making a plan for practice, you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to take the test more than once. Most students take the test, 2 to 4 times. So make sure you're giving yourself enough time so you don't just have, one opportunity. A great goal is to finish testing by the start of your senior year so that you can focus on other parts of your application in the fall. This isn't necessary, something you have to do. It's just, I think, a great goal. Many students still test in the fall of the senior year, and that's totally fine. If possible, though, It's great to get testing out of the way early because it'll make things a little less stressful in the fall of your senior year. Here's a general timeline for prep. This is not one you have to follow. There are lots of different variations here, but just to give you a sense of what one prep timeline could look like. So let's say you're a junior, you've taken the PSAT in October, and then that's often the first step for a lot of students. That kicks off preparation. And now it's winter of your junior year, so you're starting to take practice tests, and then you'll be ready to take that first test in the spring and early summer. And that gives you a couple opportunities to take the test before senior year. Next, we'll talk about how to prepare for the ACT and SAT. So at Test Innovators, we talk about the 3 steps of prep. The preparation process can be broken down into 3 big steps. Step 1, take a full-length practice test. Step 2, review your results. And step 3, do additional targeted practice. Practice tests serve as the foundation of preparation. They are the best way to familiarize yourself with the test and to learn what you need to work on. So take a practice test. Then after taking that practice test, review your results. Look at your scores and analyze each section to identify the areas that need improvement. Then study the answer solutions, so the answer explanations for every question you answered incorrectly, skipped, or guessed on. Once you've identified the areas that need improvement, do targeted practice to fill in the knowledge gaps. So review content you don't know, and then practice, the specific question types until you're confident in the skills needed to answer those question types. Then, once you've spent some time, really focusing on the areas you need to work on, take another practice test, see where you've improved, see what you still need to work on, and just repeat the process, right? Take that practice test, review your results, do more targeted practice, and keep going until test day. A little bit about our practice. So our online platform guides you through this 3 steps of prep, starting with practice tests. We currently have 4 tests for the ACT, though we are working on adding tests for the new enhanced version of the ACT. And we have 10 tests for the SAT. Those are all computer adaptive. After taking a practice test, you'll immediately get a score report with a detailed analysis that identifies, what you need to work on. And then once you know what you need to work on, you can practice with hundreds of additional questions. Our online platform, helps you figure out what you need to work on. Each question has a suggested follow-up exercise for additional practice. So you can really target the areas that you need to target and that you need to work on in order to maximize your score. And that's all for me. Back to you, Abby.
Now for the score portion of the event. First, we'll cover letters of recommendation tips. Now, we like to divide our letters of recommendation advice into 4 main categories: the when, the who, the how, and the what. So first off, the when. We'd recommend asking for letters of recommendation right now. Many students wait until the fall of their senior year to request letters of recommendation. However, it's best to ask teachers and counselors in the spring of your junior year. That way, teachers and counselors have plenty of time, including the summer, to make their letter for you strong. Now for the who. Typically, students ask their junior year teachers, since you're probably either still in their class or you've just finished that class with them. However, regardless of the year in which you had a teacher, it's most important to ask teachers who will feel comfortable writing a solid recommendation about you. So when you're thinking about who to ask, consider who can speak to your work ethic, your concern for your grades, and your ability to seek help when needed and help others who might need it. If you've declared a specific major or plan to choose a specific major, it's wise to ask a teacher in that course of study to write a letter of recommendation for you. It's totally okay to consider asking others who know you well to write you a letter of recommendation as well. These can include supervisors of extracurricular activities you're involved in, your employer, representatives from community organizations, clergy members, summer program coordinators, and more. However, we recommend refraining from sending large numbers of extra recommendation requests out and narrowing it down to just a handful of folks. Now, the how. It all depends on your school's culture, but generally, asking for recommendations in person and outside of class time is best. This opens the door to a more personal conversation with the person that's writing your letter of recommendation. Next, the what. You'll want to make writing a letter of recommendation as easy as possible for teachers and counselors. Filling out a student recommendation form, like the one that's popping up on your screen right now, is a superb way to do that. Also, an interaction sheet on which you describe past events or interactions from a time in the teacher's class or in the counselor's office can be super helpful for your recommender. This will help them recall specific characteristics of and even anecdotes about you that will help them write the recommendation. Assignment samples and lists of colleges you're applying to will also help. Now, on to college visits and lists. When you're thinking about schools to add to your list, it helps to establish your priorities and your personal preferences. Ask yourself questions like, what do I want to study? Do I want to get really involved in clubs on campus? Do I want to live in a small town or city? You've likely heard of building a college list that includes likely, level, and reach schools. This can be a really helpful way to organize colleges on your list based on how academic credentials of yours match up with those of the average student at that college. However, please don't get too caught up in the labels. Just try to build your list starting with schools within your academic reach and add any more reach schools that might be a little bit harder to get into to the bottom of your list. Definitely allow yourself to add a dream school or two to your list. However, we'd recommend building your list around level schools that will value all the incredible qualities you have to offer. 8 to 11 schools is a superb list size. When you're building your college list is also a great time to simultaneously look at careers that might be a good fit for you. Scoir has a career discovery tool where you can search for careers that might be compatible with your personality and your skill sets. There's even a career assessment that you can take to help you evaluate how certain careers could align with your personality and skills. And having a list of potential careers can be a really good thing to have in mind when you're researching colleges and exploring their academic programs and potential majors that you might want. Once you have a solid college list, it's time to start scheduling those college visits. We'd recommend seeing if the colleges on your list offer virtual tours first. This can be a great way to get a glimpse of a school without all the travel and expense. Typically, they'll give you a campus tour virtually and then have a voiceover with more information about the school. Then, once you've narrowed down your college list further, try to book some in-person tours. When I was searching for colleges and attending college tours, one of the most valuable things for me was sitting in the class that was part of the major I was considering. That was gold. I got to get a sense of the student's vibe, how class time works, and also allowed myself a moment to see if I could really see myself attending this school. Also, classes and class styles can be different from school to school. For example, some schools really emphasize having lecture classes in large groups, others are more discussion-based, and so on and so forth. So this can be a great way to explore the class styles that you like best. Typically, college tours include a tour of campus and the buildings, but if you have a chance, try exploring the building of your desired major a bit more. This could also give you an opportunity to run into professors or other staff that might be in the department that you're looking to go into, or that teach in the major that you're looking at. And this could be a great way to ask questions and get answers. We'd also recommend talking to your tour guide or someone from the admissions office to see if you could set up an admissions interview, which could really give you a leg up in the admissions process. Even if you're an introvert like me, it is so worth it to try at least to talk to staff and students on campus. In my experience, people are more than happy to answer your questions, and you can get a lot of your answers cleared up at these college tours. Make sure you plan something fun to do after the tour as well. I found this to be super helpful for me. After all, you'll be living in this place potentially for 4 years, and it's helpful to do things in the town or the city. This can also help you envision if you could see yourself living there. Next, let's talk about financial aid. Now, there's a few things you're going to need to have on your radar: the FAFSA, the CSS profile, and independent scholarships. You're likely going to fill out the FAFSA and other financial aid forms in your senior year of high school, most likely in the fall or winter of your senior year. However, it's never too early to start planning financially for college. The FAFSA is the most common financial aid form. The FAFSA is a government document that references data from your parents' or guardians' IRS return to calculate your family's need and determine your eligibility for federal and state funds. Your FAFSA application usually determines the amount of support you might receive from the college you end up attending from the federal and or state government. If you're applying to private colleges, you'll want to check if they require that you submit the College Scholarship Service, CSS, profile to determine your eligibility for institution-specific funding. This application has a more granular analysis of your family's finances. The CSS profile is customizable by each participating college to reflect institution-specific requirements. So the FAFSA is specifically for federal and state funding, and the CSS profile is for college funding from a specific college you have applied to or will attend. We'd recommend taking some time now to learn more about the FAFSA and CSS profile. The pop-up that will appear on your screen right about now has a link to an article. This article walks through the basics of financial aid. This is a great place to start. When you're adding colleges to your list, be sure to research any grants or discounts they may provide you so you can budget accordingly. You can also start researching independent scholarships and add them to a list so you can start applying now and through the summer. One of our favorite tips is to put on 4 songs and find as many scholarships as you can and add them to your list. So, like I said, there's a few things that you can do right now when it comes to preparing financially for college as a 10th or 11th grader. While it's likely a bit early for you to start filling out financial aid apps right now, you can definitely start learning about the different options available. While you're doing that, you can also start gathering financial records and any personal information that you'll need to reference as you're filling out the financial aid forms. Think things like tax returns, W-2s, bank statements, social security numbers, records of untaxed income and investment records, so on and so forth. As you're gathering all this information, you can start researching independent scholarships as well. We'd recommend reaching out to your counselor as they can likely provide you with a list of scholarships you can apply for. You can also search online for independent scholarships. There are a lot of scholarship search engines out there. As we mentioned earlier, building your college list is a great way to start preparing for the cost of college as well. It's a great way to information gather and see what maybe you can expect to spend at different schools based on your need level and the general cost for the school. As you're building your college list, be sure to keep in mind the estimated cost of each college and how much aid you can expect to receive from each school. Now I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of the Scoir student experience. Any student can create a free Scoir account even if their high school isn't a Scoir customer. In Scoir, students can discover colleges with filtered searches, explore careers based on their interests, sign up for events and programs, and more. Once you conduct a college search, you can filter by academic focus, location, degree type, size, extracurriculars, and more. You can also check out a college's page, and if you like what you see, you can follow the college. That will add the college to your My Colleges list, where you can keep track of the colleges you're following, applied to, or have applied to. It makes it easy to see all of your colleges organized and laid out. Counselors who have access to the paid version of Scoir for high schools can also view a student's My Colleges list and suggest colleges that may interest a student, which makes it easier to have that close collaboration. In your My Colleges list, that's where students can also request a letter of recommendation from their students and counselors. Students and counselors can collaborate with any needed documents here as well. As students are looking for colleges, they can also see if the college is hosting any upcoming visits at their school, which is a great way to get to know a school, or you can hop to the Discover tab to see if the college has any upcoming events and easily sign up. Finally, once a student is ready to apply, you can get really helpful financial aid resources in a few places. On a college's page, you can explore the cost and aid section, where you can get cost breakdowns and financial aid averages, such as number of students who receive financial aid. You can also explore any posts a college has made on financial aid. On your dashboard, we'll show you opportunities where students can apply to college for free and see if they're eligible for a fee waiver when they apply right on Scoir. Finally, if you want more financial aid information, we're also constantly posting helpful resources on the Scoir blog. And that's an overview of how you can use Scoir to help you with college prep. You can create a free student account on Scoir for free at app.scoir.com/signup. And that's all we have for today. We covered ACT and SAT prep tips on letters of recommendation, advice on college list building and college visits, and some more details on financial aid. We also shared how Scoir and Test Innovators can help. We'll be sharing a follow-up email after the event with the recording, as well as some more helpful resources to check out. Thank you again for attending today. Please let us know how we did in the poll that's about to pop up on your screen. We'll be available to answer any questions you may have in the chat for the next 10 minutes. You can also learn more about Test Innovators and Scoir at the links that we will drop in the chat right now. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.